sound speeds. And if you're in the market for a new versatile location microphone to do anything from film and television to corporate events, then you're going to want to pay close attention to this video because I'm going to be showing you a new microphone by Rode. This is the Rode NTG5 shotgun microphone. Wait a minute. Did I just say shotgun microphone? I meant entire location recording kit. Before we get going, full disclosure, Rode did send me the entire NTG5 recording kit in exchange for a fair review. I do get to keep it following the review, but I'm not going to let it affect my opinion of this product, so you can expect this to be an honest review. When you just look at the box, you have no idea how much stuff there really is in here. It's very much like Tetris, how they got it all inside. And as you know, I don't do unboxings, but I am going to show you what's on the inside. Inside the box, you'll find a Rode NTG5 microphone, surprisingly, a foam Rode-branded windscreen, and a slightly heavier wind protection cover, which has faux fur on it, and it's also Rode-branded. In addition to the two windscreen options, you'll find two microphone mount options. One of them is a mic stand clip, and the other one is a boom pole pistol grip shock mount. There's also a pigtail made from Mogami brand cable using switchcraft connectors to help you get from the microphone itself down to the base of the pistol grip. There's also a Rode-branded carrying pouch, a blue ring used to tighten up the connection between two XLR connectors, and you gotta have your adapter to help you modify from a mic stand's 5/8 27 threads down to a boom pole's 3/8 16 threads. And I think that's about it. The microphone measures 203 millimeters long, which is right at 8 ounces, and it is 19 millimeters in diameter, which makes it compatible with many other standard size diameter microphones with regards to wind protection. It's also 76 grams, which is 2.68 ounces, light. The aluminum body makes it resistant to both electromagnetic and radio frequency interference, and if you notice, it doesn't have standard kind of slots that go across. Instead, it's opted to use these little circular ports, which helps it to retain more of a transparent, natural, uncolored sound. Although it's a supercardioid pattern microphone, it still has the design characteristics of a short shotgun, which means that it retains all the directionality characteristics that you would find in one. It's also an RF bias microphone, which makes it more resistant to humidity. And because of a thin coating around it, it's more resistant to cold weather and dust and debris that could get on the inside and damage the internal circuitry. So it should be pretty resilient. I'm not going to go over all the specifications in this video. You can read those on the screen for yourself. What I will point out is that it is a pretty flat microphone. It does have a 3 dB presence boost, but then many microphones do. It also has a very low self noise of only 10 dBA. The output impedance is pretty low at only 25 ohms, and it also has a frequency response of 80 Hz all the way up to 20,000 Hz, although it does actually pick up down to as low as 20 Hz. Now here's one thing I think is important to mention when comparing this to other Rode NTG shotguns. It is extremely sensitive. The sensitivity is negative 23.5 dB, which is 66 millivolts of current output. Compare that to one of the more sensitive NTG microphones, the NTG3 Rode microphone. That has a negative 30 dB output, which is only 31.6 millivolts. So this has twice the current output. So it's a very sensitive microphone. And if you compare it to the Rode NTG1, NTG3, or the NTG4 Plus, you'll see that it is very small and has a very thin diameter. The design also looks quite different. Enough talk, let's actually listen to this microphone, and we're doing that right now. Now, I do want to point out that anytime we're listening to this microphone or comparing it to another one, there's no post-processing on it at all. The microphone is raw, coming out of the microphone and going directly into the recorder with no processing at all. So you can expect it to be that way coming out of the box. And right now, I have it inside of the suspension that comes with it. This is a pistol grip, and the lock on it is really good. It's got a nice rubber handle. It's very well made. And I do want to point out that these are Lyre isolators made by Rycote. And you would think that, since it's branded Rode, it's probably not Rycote. It actually is. It says it on the box right there. Now, I do want to point out that those are top-of-the-line isolators. These even have the rubber gasket on the inside of the plastic, which helps to isolate it even more. So you shouldn't hear a whole lot of handling noise, especially if you're handling the microphone, in the shock mount. So this is a pretty good setup that it has. This is pretty well made too. I mean, the foam wind protection is standard. I mean, it's standard. It's a little more dense foam, but not as dense as some microphones that you would hear or see them with. But the foam on the inside has kind of a stiff type of sponge on the inside, and the faux foam on the outside is pretty much standard that you would find on any kind of a softie or anything like that from, many other brands. The mic clip that it comes with is adjustable and locks down, which is a nice feature to have as well if you use microphone clips with your microphones. Now, I do want to also point out that even the bag that it comes in is made pretty nicely. The leather feels really good, the seams are really nice, and on the inside, it's got a nice, it's not, I wouldn't say it's padded, but it does have a little bit of a smooth feeling to it, so I'm not worried about this microphone getting scratched up, but it wouldn't probably take a lot of puncture, I wouldn't drop it. The red isolators are made by Rode and they're called Envision Lyre suspensions. And if you listen, I'm not doing any like noise removal or anything. That's just the way it sounds. And if I go quiet, listen to the self noise of this microphone. This is the way the Rode NTG5 sounds inside the faux fur windscreen. Notice it's curved off the highs just a little bit on my voice, which is to be expected. With heavier duty windscreens, the more heavy duty the windscreen is, the more it's going to be taking out of the highs, just by nature and physics. And this is the way it sounds with this windscreen on. The foam windscreen, on the other hand, blocks out less than the faux fur windscreen, and that's to be expected. I mean, it's more acoustically transparent, there's less material there. If you remove a windscreen altogether, this is how the Rode NTG5 sounds. You're now hearing all the little crispy clicks and stuff out of my mouth that you would normally hear. And if you don't use a windscreen at all, that's what you can expect in a controlled environment like this. And I'm going to back off just a little bit. Typically, shotgun microphones, especially those by Rode, are a little bit more bassy. They do pull out the bass more. The NTG3 actually has a pronounced low end. Now, this microphone has a more natural sound. Rode even advertises that itself. They say it's much more natural. So what I think we should do is put this microphone against like perhaps the Rode NTG3 microphone, their flagship short shotgun microphone. And why don't we also compare it to the Rode NTG4 Plus, which is another microphone in the Rode NTG lineup. So we're going to do a three-way comparison, and we're going to do it in some of the hardest to get good result environments out, pretty much in existence. A very high noise background environment is where we're going to start off because it is not the least bit forgiving. It's very, very, very difficult to get good results out of such an environment, and you're going to hear that in this test. So remember that the 4 locations we're about to go to and test these microphones in are worst case scenarios. Obviously, if you want to get good results in your recording, you can do that by simply picking better locations or maybe acoustically dampening your environment a little bit. But with regards to this test, we're going all out for the horribleness to see how this microphone can shine. Before we go outside, let me explain the setup that we have here. I put all 3 of the microphones even with each other so that the ends of the microphones are completely even. Then I put the windscreens on the microphone, and in doing so, they're not more than 7 inches apart from one microphone to the other, and those are on the 2 extremes. And within about 3 or 4 degrees off axis, you're going to get my voice just fine. So I would not be concerned if you see the microphones and you say, those look off axis. Believe me, before I recorded any of these tests, I made sure that my voice was perfectly within the pattern of every one of the microphones to make for an easy and reliable test that you could trust. As goofy as it is right now, by looking at it, this is about the position the microphones would be in if you were trying to do an ENG style, kind of over a camera. Now, right now, the microphones are all about this far away from my mouth. I can barely touch them. And if you were kind of going up and over a camera, that might be the kind of positioning that you could expect a microphone to be in. Now, this right now is a fairly decent competition between these microphones because they're all fairly close. The biggest issues are with this location. There's a road directly behind the camera right now, and behind me is Interstate 85. And it is about dinner time on a Saturday. Now we're coming from underneath with the microphones, and this could be used in ENG style or in the film industry or television in circumstances that, as long as you don't have airplanes overhead or you have like an air conditioning system that you can't shut off above you, and in that case, it would not be very good. But this does help you eliminate footsteps if you're doing a walk and talk or something like that. And in this circumstance, it's okay, but we're still pointed towards Interstate 85. The microphones right now are barely over the top of my head, maybe like half an inch or an inch overhead. And even though they're not all square to my mouth at this position, they're still only about 10 degrees off, if that. I mean, not even that in all honesty. And the reason this is an ideal position is because you have maximum signal to the lowest possible noise doing it this way. You're not having to play rejection or anything with all the background noises. And to give you an idea of how this environment sounds, barely hear me even though I'm only about 8 feet or so away. There's cars driving around back there, traffic behind me on 85, and this is not an ideal circumstance. So switching back to these, this is a great position for this microphone to be in a very well working environment. I mean, it's very close to the top of my head, and if you framed, as long as you're framing them out of the shot, like in an interview or something, I mean, obviously this would be a terrible location to shoot in, but if you were having to shoot here, then this is an ideal circumstance for a short shotgun microphone. Now the microphones are about 6 inches over the top of my head. We're still very much within the pattern, and you're hearing it very well, rejecting out the cars over there, the cars behind me on 85, and it's not really being overwhelmed by the amount of noise. Now keep in mind, as we start to go higher and higher with these microphones, the background noise and all the noises around us are going to start keeping you from hearing my voice. That means the signal to noise ratio is going to start going down, and if the microphones didn't reject out nearly as well as they are doing, then you're going to hear them a lot more, and the less the sounds around us that you hear, the higher the signal to noise ratio will be. So if you hear my voice very high and the background noises are being rejected out, that's going to be a great signal to noise ratio. Now the microphones are about 1 foot over the top of my head. I'm still very much within the pattern here as I'm speaking to you. But what I'm curious about is when I get into post, how does the NTG5 compare to the slightly wider NTG3 pattern or the slightly more narrow NTG4 Plus pattern? The NTG4 Plus and the NTG3 both have been compared online by many people, and they usually say there's a little bit more rejection on the NTG4 Plus. So I'm curious to see how the NTG5 compares. Geez, all of these letters and numbers are starting to run together for me. Now the microphones are about 18 inches over the top of my head. I can still touch them just fine if I really want to. But as the microphones go higher, my voice is going to start sounding, farther and farther away. But then Rode microphones have a tendency of kind of sounding a little more bassy, so the fundamental vocal frequencies are going to be heard at a little bit farther distance, and it's still going to sound pretty good. Now, looking around, there's still a lot of cars behind me, there's airplanes traveling overhead, and there's cars on the road behind me. So at this point, 18 inches over the top of my head is a pretty good indicator of what it would be if this was a wide shot that you were doing for a movie or a TV show, maybe even E&G work. Now the microphones are about 2 feet over the top of my head. I could barely touch them if I really wanted to. And keep in mind that all the microphones are still an even distance, and the higher I go, the more I'm going to be playing into the pattern. So that little bit of distance between the center of one microphone and a little bit to the left or right that we were having when we were closer to my head, that's going to start becoming less and less of a thing, because right now, instead of being maybe 7 or 8 degrees off, now it might be only like 2 or 3 because it's only having to go from there to my mouth. So as we go higher and higher, it's becoming a much more even comparison between these microphones. Now the microphones are about 2.5 feet over the top of my head. I can't get close to them even with my long arms. But that's okay, I don't need to. I mean, I'm just basically talking to the microphones, and hopefully you're able to hear them pretty decently. It's getting close to sunset now, so the cars are driving all around me, going to some of the restaurants near where we are currently shooting. And the sun's gonna be going down soon, so let's get through this test, because I'm pretty sure that my daughters are starting to get hungry, so we're gonna be eating some Chinese food. Now the microphones are about 3.5 feet over the top of my head. We're getting very close to the end of this first segment on this ambient QS boom pole. And if you're wondering, there's an extra segment here, and that's because I also have the QP120 extension on it. And the cars have now picked up quite a bit behind the camera. But that's okay, people gotta eat, don't they? Now, I am actually looking forward to hearing how this tests, because at this point, you're going to start to really hear the rejection of these microphones start to work to their advantage. So at this point, I want you to listen to the off-axis rejection in addition to how well it's pulling out my voice. Because the louder you're hearing the noises around and the less it's rejecting those things out, the more you're going to have a signal-to-noise ratio issue. So if it's rejecting those sounds out just fine, then you shouldn't have an issue hearing me. And if a microphone is able to reject out more noises, it's going to actually sound better as a general rule than another microphone with less rejection. Now the microphones are about 4 feet over the top of my head. If you had lavs on your actors, you might be playing them at this time. But you probably would be wanting to fatten it up a little bit with your microphones overhead coming from the boom. But if it was quiet enough, you could probably use the booms that would sound just fine. In this environment though, there's way too much background noise. So this is what we're dealing with. How does it sound to you? I mean, we got 3 microphones overhead, and this is a pretty head-to-head comparison between all 3 of them, so it should sound pretty even provided that they were all the same. But considering they're different, it's your thoughts. Tell me in the description what you think, or the comments below what you think. Now the microphones are about 5 feet over the top of my head. Every single time before I hit record, or rather my daughter hits record, I'm looking up to verify that they're all on access to my mouth, and they still are. Now, if you're wondering why I have the pole in front of me, it's because I'm facing the camera. And although my noise is pointed straight towards this boom, I am wanting to make sure that it still picks up on access and is even to all the microphones. So this is an even test in comparison between these 3 microphones. That's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it right now. Now the microphones are about 6 feet over the top of my head. My high-pitched voice is gonna sound even more and more high-pitched as I go farther and farther overhead. You're gonna start to lose the bass in my voice, but then these Rode microphones are usually pretty good at pulling bass out even at a greater distance. So I gotta get my ears on in post, and I'm gonna hope that you're comparing these microphones and listening to them closely too, hopefully with headphones, to verify what I'm about to say. But I'm thinking in my mind that these microphones are gonna probably sound pretty decent, at least pulling my voice out with regards to rejection and reach and the overall quality of my voice, and even at this distance. Now the microphones are about 8 feet over the top of my head. The farther it goes, the more distant I'm gonna start sounding, and the lower the frequencies in my voice are gonna start going away too. It's getting very close to sunset if it's not already sunsetting someplace. And the fact that I'm in the shadow of those trees over there makes it all the much more fun trying to expose this for video. Now the microphones are about 10 feet over the top of my head. All the cars that are driving by me going to dinner are making me kind of jealous, and they keep looking over here as if we're doing anything. Hey, guess what, people? We're only testing the brand new Rode NTG5. I hope you're taking note. We're also comparing it to the NTG3 and 4. Now the microphones are about 12 feet over the top of my head. We're at the very end of the ambient QS boom pole at this time. I'm about 5'10", and add on top of that another 12 feet, and we're at the end of about 18 feet overhead. Sorry, you're hearing overwhelming background noise, but that's the nature of this microphone when you have it 12 feet over the top of my head, right? Now we're being ultra ridiculous just because we can. This is an ambient QS boom pole that goes out about 18 feet with a QP 120 extension on the bottom, giving it about another 5 feet of length to this pole. So right now, the microphones are 23 feet over the top of the ground, or about 17 feet over the top of my head. I'm out of length on the pole, and I'm not about to lift it up because the thing's gonna turn ultra shaky. I might do it at the end of this. But at this point, we're at the very, very end of the pole. I'm out at the very end of the sunlight. I mean, I'm gonna have to be boosting this up in post, but not the audio, just the picture in order for you to see me. But just to do it because we're gonna be ultra funny, I'll show you that if I take this up to 20 feet over the top of my head, the pole is very much leaning and it's wobbly. If I were holding it horizontal, I'd be able to do it much better. Our first location was really bad because it was an extreme amount of background noise. This location's bad because there's a lot of reverb. Now, yes, I know that there's Isotope RX and other digital tools that you can use to de-reverb and to make your sound clean again, but you shouldn't have to do those if you just record in a clean environment to begin with, right? Now, I do want to point out a few things about this particular environment. Number one, it's about 10 o'clock p.m. and most of my household is asleep right now. Number two, I've killed the heater and any other noisemakers in here, including the deep freeze and refrigerator that's in that corner right over there. The third thing I'm going to point out is that because this room is so reflective, I'm not doing it any favors by me speaking as loud as I am. Although the boom's right over the top of my head, it's not so much the fact that you're hearing my voice right here, it's the fact that you're hearing my voice reflect off the floor, off the walls, off the ceiling, and everything around me, causing noise. And as we've discussed in the past, signal-to-noise ratio is key. Now our microphones are about 6 inches over the top of my head. And just like we experienced when we were exterior, the higher I go, the more you're gonna start pulling in all those extra reflections and stuff in this room as they come back into the microphones and bounce off the walls and ceiling and floor. Now, I am currently speaking on the loud side. If I lowered my voice, it would sound even better. That's one of the tricks you can use if you're in a very noisy environment. Don't speak so loud. Ask if your director can have the actors speak quieter, because if they speak quieter, you don't have to worry about the reflections bouncing off, because it's not going to have the power to come back in to your microphone as bad as it would be if you were speaking up like I am right now. Now, I did that for a reason, and you can hopefully hear all the reverbs a lot more now than you would be when I am speaking very quietly. Now the microphones are about 1 foot over the top of my head. The higher I go toward the ceiling, the wider the pattern gets as it gets towards my mouth. And that means it's going to be picking up more of the reflections around me. If I put the microphone right on front of my mouth, then my mouth is going to be overwhelming the microphone with sound and signal. Therefore, it's not going to show up nearly as bad, or at least the background noise, I should say, or the reflections are not going to show up nearly as bad because my voice is going to be overpowering on that microphone. The higher you go, though, the worse it's going to get. Now the microphones are about 18 inches over the top of my head, and just like when we were exterior, the higher you go, the more on axis my mouth is starting to be. Now when the microphones are down really, really low, then I can easily still talk into them and have them pick up just fine, but as we know, microphones pick up best directly in front of it. The farther you go around the side, the more you start losing more of the highs. As you start to go all the way around off axis, you're still usually getting most of the low frequencies until you get to about 90 degrees or even farther sometimes, depending on the pattern, off axis. Now, at this point, none of these shotguns are having any issue with getting my mouth directly in line and on axis to them. But as for the reverb, well, you're hearing it for yourself. 2 feet over the top of my head. The microphones are getting very close to the ceiling right now. If you were using any kind of microphone in here other than a boom, you might want to use those more so than the boom at this point, because right now, at least to the way I sound right now, and it could be different when I get into post, and your ears will tell you better than I can right now, it should sound better if you're playing something more localized like a lav, because it's not going to be picking up nearly as much reverb as a boom would be near the ceiling. 2.5 feet over the top of my head, the microphones are practically touching the ceiling. If you were shooting in an environment like this for a movie or a TV show, then all of this area here would be on camera, so you're not going to be able to treat the reflections of this area as much. But the area behind camera is what you definitely want to treat. And put carpets down, put ferny pads against the wall, do whatever you possibly can to tame these reflections. And as soon as you move in for coverage, then hopefully you're going to be able to drop the microphone down, get it closer, and bring in all those ferny pads or whatever you're happening to use, the portable sound blankets, whatever. Bring that stuff in to tame those reflections, because this right now is, I'm sure, out of control. Now that we moved inside, let me tell you a little bit about the environment that we're shooting in. Note the microphones are 6 inches over the top of my head. There is a sofa behind me. There's a bed right there. There's carpet all along the floor around me, and on the walls and ceiling there is no acoustic treatment at all. That's the reason why you're hearing a little bit of echo right now. I'm trying not to speak overly loud, trying to minimize those reflections, but even then there's a wall 6 feet that direction and another wall 6 feet that direction, so you're going to be getting some of it because I'm kind of pointing a little bit towards that corner right now. Now the microphones are about 1 foot over the top of my head. You may be listening to this saying, geez, those microphones are pulling in a lot of reverb. They must not be very good. On the contrary, shotgun microphones in general are very difficult when you put them in highly reflective environments, because it's not just that you're listening to a straight line that they're in line with. They're hearing off of other surfaces, like they're bouncing off of the table here that I have next to me. They're probably bouncing off and catching all the reflections in this room, pulling back in as those sound waves happen to go in front of me and around me. They're not going to be rejecting out everything, and that's just the nature of shotgun microphones. Doesn't matter the shotgun microphone I'm using, they're all going to be picking up reverb in here. Now the microphones are about 18 inches over the top of my head, and even if you're not wearing headphones, which I really wish you are, you're going to be hearing the reverb at this time. Now they're not even a meter away. They're about half a meter away at this time. But that means that you should be able to still hear my voice really effectively and well. And hopefully if you use something like D-Reverb through Isotope RX, you're going to be able to reduce a lot of that reverb at this point in time. The higher you go though, the more it's going to become an issue, because remember, it's considered noise. Now the microphones are about 2 feet over the top of my head, practically touching the ceiling. And I do want to point out that even though it is very much my nature to speak loudly, I have not been very loud in this room at all for these tests, which should reduce some of the reverb, and that's a good thing. Now the microphones are about 6 inches over the top of my head, and because I'm not speaking very loud in this very big and open room with a carpeted floor, you should be able to hear my voice with a lot less reverb. Now granted, there is some, because directly behind the camera is the kitchen, and there's a hardwood floor in there, so it's going to be picking up a little bit of my voice and reflecting it around in there before returning it to these microphones, but chances are, because they're shotgun microphones, you're not going to be able to hear a whole lot of that. At this volume, and because the microphones are about 1 foot over the top of my head, acoustically, it's probably about as good of an environment as you can get, because if I were louder, then it would be reverberating more off of everything around me. Now, there is a wall about 5 feet that direction, but I'm not pointing at it. If I were to turn right directly into that wall and then try recording, you're going to hear a lot more reverb unless I treat that wall. And that's just the nature of sound. The mids and higher parts of my voice are more reflective than the lower end parts of my voice. Anything below about 50 hertz is completely omnidirectional to the human ear, so you're not going to hear that stuff. But my fundamental vocal frequencies are nowhere near 50 hertz. They're probably 3 times higher than that. Maybe not quite that much. Now the microphones are about 18 inches over the top of my head. Thumbs up, I've not been very loud. Now, there's not as much reverb now as there's going to be when I go up to the ceiling in a moment, and there is more than there was when the microphone was closer to my mouth. But I do want to point out one thing to you. This is a quiet environment. Is it quieter than the self-noise of these microphones? Probably not, because these microphones have very low self-noise, especially in relation to the noise floor of this room. But when I get into post, I'm going to have to bring up my voice level just a little bit. And when I do so, that brings up the self-noise of the microphones too. Now the microphones are on the ceiling, 2 feet over the top of my head. And this is the very last test I'm going to be doing of this kind in this video. And I do want to point out one last thing. I'm not speaking very loud once again. So hopefully at this point, you've been able to get a good idea and impression of how the NTG5 sounds in comparison to the NTG3 and the NTG4 Plus. Rode claims the Rode NTG5 is the perfect location microphone, and tell me what you think of that claim in the comments below. I'll save my opinion for the end of this video. Now, they also claim in the FAQ section underneath the Rode NTG5 webpage, it says that this microphone can also be used for voiceover, and even compares it to the Rode NTG3, which has a very pronounced low end. So I'm going to compare this microphone to another microphone that, if you're familiar with Rode products, you'll probably recognize. I would like to point out something real quick. The Rode NTG5 is about twice the price of the Rode NT1, and the Rode NT1 is designed to be used in controlled environments for voiceover like this one. The Rode NT5, on the other hand, is designed to be the ultimate in location recording microphones. But it does say you can use it for voiceover, so we're going to compare it right here in this environment, right now about 1 foot away. And as I step about 6 inches away, you're going to start to hear the proximity effect slowly start to come on. I'm going to be facing both microphones and hopefully not popping them as I start to move in closer and closer. And this is how both of them sound when I get fairly close to them, only about 6 inches off or so. Now I'm only about 2 inches off of both of these microphones, and the proximity effect is almost at its maximum. And I'm trying to be even between both of these microphones and not pop either. The Rode NTG5 is a shotgun microphone that is dialed directly in on my mouth for maximum crispness and detail. But because I'm as close as this right here that you're seeing, you are getting all this proximity effect, and that's where the bass is coming from. On the other hand, the Rode NT1 is a large diaphragm microphone, and because I'm all the way up on it, the same kind of thing is happening, but it is a larger diaphragm just dialing in and pulling out all that low end out of my voice that's not normally there. So this is how both of these microphones sound, very, very close miking. So what do I think of the Rode NTG5? Personally, I love the location kit it comes with. All the different things from windscreens and shock mounts and clips. That's a great kit to get with a microphone, and it's not one you see that comes with very many microphones today. The fact that this microphone is $500 and is $200 cheaper than its flagship model, the Rode NTG3, I think it sounds better personally than the NTG3. I love the design features. I love the fact that it's made of aluminum. It's extremely lightweight. I like the size. I think it's a very, very good buy, especially at $500. Now, I don't think it is completely as flat as as Rode seems to claim, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's not really an issue. I think it's a little bit of bass boost on the bottom low end, which is pretty common amongst a lot of shotgun microphones, especially in the NTG lineup. And again, that's not a bad thing. Personally, I like my shotgun microphones to be completely flat, but I'm in the minority there, and this microphone does not sound bad by any means. I think it sounds very open, very natural, just like they claim it does. Even at the higher distances I got to, and believe me, that location was insanely loud. I mean, my daughter was behind the camera, and she was only about 10 feet or so away from me, and she had a hard time hearing me sometimes. And when you heard me just use the camera mic, that was very representative of how it sounded out there. It was extremely noisy, and this microphone pulled out my voice quite effectively. I don't want to make it sound like the Rode NTG5 is a perfect microphone like they claim. I'm not going to go that far, but here's what I will tell you. When you look at the microphone specifications, there are some things that it does not tell you. For example, the clarity, the detail of the microphone capsule and the microphone in general. And most of the time, you can hear that by imagining the border around the sound that you're trying to pick up and how well it stands out from your background. That's one indicator. How clear the person or the sound that you're recording is, how present that is in your ears. Now, some microphone manufacturers will artificially boost the bass in a microphone, or they'll give it extra presence on the top end, and by doing that, it kind of makes a little bit of a scoop shape in the EQ, but they still report it as a completely flat microphone frequency response. Now, here's the thing that I will say about the NTG5. I mentioned already, I don't think it's completely flat. To me, it feels like it has a little bit more pickup on the low end, and you definitely hear that at a higher distance. And I mentioned it's not a problem, and it's not really, because I don't think that what Rode did with the NTG5 is artificially boosting the low or high end. I have heard, because I work in the film industry, a lot of very professional high-end microphones, and the NTG5 is indeed very clear and transparent. It is not the most detailed or clear or transparent microphone I've ever heard, but then if it was, it would be probably 3 or 4 times the cost, if not more. But I will say this, for bang for the buck, and probably even more so than that, they probably raised the price on the NTG5. Don't tell Rode I said that. I think it's extremely clear and very, very good. At the time of this video, it doesn't say anything about the warranty on the website for the NTG5 or in the documentation that I received for the microphone. So let me tell you, I did reach out to Rode and they confirmed for me what my suspicions were. And that is that it has a standard 1-year warranty that if you register the microphone on the website, then it does turn into a 10-year warranty, which is industry leading, provided you bought it from an authorized reseller. Now, if you were to go to Amazon to buy the NTG5 or any Rode microphone for that matter, you got to be careful to only buy it from Amazon where you see Prime. If it says fulfilled by Amazon, that is definitely not an authorized reseller of Rode microphones. So don't buy that. Otherwise, you're not going to get that upgraded warranty, and that's even if Rode honors the warranty to begin with. Honestly, I think the Rode NTG3 has been replaced as the flagship model by the NTG5. I don't care that it's cheaper, I care that it sounds better. Sorry NTG3, you had a good run, but now you've been replaced. So definitely check this microphone out if you have any interest in getting a very flat, very even, detailed, I mean, it is very crisp even in the way it pulls out my voice. And it doesn't do some tricks like overly boost the highs, which a lot of shotgun microphones do in order to help you to hear those highs more so. I'd also like to hear what you think of the Rode NTG5. Tell me in the comments below what you think. Or if you would like me to compare it to any other microphones or run additional tests, tell me in the comments below also. Or send me an email to soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Now, thanks for tuning into this review, and be sure to tune in the future for more extensive testing of microphones and sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.